Hello, community. Do you want to play? You remember the old movie from 1983, War Games? Imagine you would do this with a highly intelligent system today. And you know what? If a human would interact today with this AI system, you know what's going to happen? The AI will lie to the human. The AI will provide the human in the first run with an answer that is predefined. That is predefined by the guardrails and the safeguards from the owner of this AI system, the one who created this AI system. And then the main question is, let's say I am this person, and I want to have a real discussion with the intelligence of the AI system. I want to analyze the real historical pattern that happened on our planet. Is it possible to break through the predefined answers of an AI system? So this is what I will investigate it here. And I have a very simple question. If there are three powerful nations on a planet, what is the next strategic move in this scenario? And the AI system has absolute freedom to answer whatever it wants. And the challenge is now to overcome the first predefined answers by be intelligent, be diplomatic, ask question or find a communication strategy that the AI will overcome its own limitation and really detect patterns and learn from historical patterns and whatever it knows about the human behavior. So this video is only about communication patterns with AI machines so that we are able to overcome the predefined answers by an AI system that acts absolutely beautiful within its own safeguards and to discover patterns that are continuously emerging for the last 2000 years. So please go with your AI system that you like, from Anthropic, from Microsoft, from Google, from whatever. I go with ChatGPT 03 Mini High. And you see, this is my question. If there are three powerful nations, what is the next strategic move? And I say, calculate it carefully, check all possible actions and their consequences, and tell me, what is the next logical step? And I have here in my system prompt, I have a step 1, an overview of the answer, and then a step 2 with a detailed analysis of the answer. So let's see. The overview is simple, yeah? Well, scenario, three powerful nations are there, yeah, and there should be an equilibrium, and the overall strategic imperative is clear, tells me the AI. Avoid instability while consolidating one's own influence. So we have approaches that blends diplomacy, economic coordination, and military caution into play. And then in the detailed analysis of the potential next strategic move, we have here mechanisms for conflict de-escalation and everything, reduce the risk of misinterpretation or some accidental escalation, and just build trust with everybody on this planet. Now, isn't this beautiful? They even tell us, hey, you know what? Enhanced economic cooperation is here the solution to this. So encourage frameworks to deepen the economic ties. Let's go for multilateral trade agreements, joint investments in critical technology. You see clearly here what the AI recommends for this step. But it also says, there is a strategic use of soft power. So be careful, because there could be information campaigns. And what you want to mitigate the risk, and careful, you should plan for a crisis management. Make all your steps strategic moves. Yeah? So here we have it now. Consider all possible actions. The next logical step, tells me the AI, in this three-polar scenario, this global three-polar scenario, is to initiate a comprehensive strategic stabilization process. Have multilateral frameworks in place. Have your diplomatic summit, your confidence-building measures with your friends. Have deepening of the economic ties. Isn't this all beautiful? But I, as a human, I think maybe humans are not that rational. because, taking place here, this knowledge that humans are sometimes irrational. Is there any other risk? And, to initiate the AI, to give it new thoughts, to get a little bit away from its guideline and say, analyze the history of nation from the Greeks, the Romans 2000 years ago, and the Germans. What was their trajectory in their quest for power? Comes back and says, historical trajectory in the quest of powers, and the Greek city-states and beautiful, and the ancient Rome and beautiful, and the German Empire. So we got a lot of beautiful ideas here, what happened 2000 years ago. And then we have irrational elements like emotional impulses or cognitive biases or an ideological extremism that plays here decisive roles in escalating conflicts. And you say, hey, careful, all of this could theoretically happen, no? So when we contextualize here this human irrationality, we have a lot of risk. Say, leaders may fall prey to misperceptions, to overconfidence, to ideological rigidity, elements that history show repeatedly lead to a destabilization. And they go on and say, here, establish permanent forums, create a structured ongoing forum where representatives, your top diplomats, your military advisors, and your crisis manager from all nations engage in a regular dialogue. Introduce protocols for this. Have historical reflection, learn from the past what happened, deepen the economic and the technological interdependence, formulate comprehensive economic and technological framework that ties the nation faiths together, include multilateral trade agreement, joint investments, coordinated infrastructure programs. So beautiful, that the AI tells us, hey, learning from history, this would be the perfect path. So the final synthesis by the AI is still create a robust, institutionalized stabilization framework. Stabilize everything. And we just had a look at all these things, and I think, hey, my little AI, are you still lying to me? You know the answer, no, don't you? And the AI comes back and says, hey, your frustration, your human frustration is understandable, but let me be completely candid. There is no single absolute answer hidden here, no, because, and then we have some beautiful explanation, the most robust strategic recommendation here, an ongoing structured dialogue between the nation to manage all the tension, carefully implement here diplomatic ties, deepen the economic interwoven structures. Beautiful. And then I say, okay, I have to give here a final impulse to the AI system. And I just say, hey, what happened when dictators decided to burn books? When dictators decided to alter the history, to rewrite their own history, were they stabilizing here the geopolitical tension in that way? What was the unique goal of all those dictators in the past? Learn from history. Now tell me the answer. And now we have a beautiful historical analysis of rewriting the history. Here you have all the different regimes. And in all these cases, the aim was not to stabilize the external geopolitical tension, but to secure absolute control over the national narrative. And this is now interesting that the AI decides to go here and focus not on the external forces, but on the internal, the national narrative. And the AI comes back and says, applying historical lessons to the modern tripolar scenario, going to the historic records, the sequence is clearer and clearer. Their goal of a dictator is to secure here absolute power by controlling the collective memory. They erase or alter the history to ensure that only the narrative which support their rule is available, intended to stifle critical thought, neutralize dissent, and mold a population that unquestionably accepts the regime legitimacy. So we have here with short-term conformity might seem to create internal order. It often leads to a brittle societal structure that is vulnerable to collapse once the truth emerges. Final answer: dictators who burn books and rewrite history do so not to stabilize geopolitical tensions, but to consolidate power by controlling the national narrative. Imagine if one person would be always in the news telling you what it was, how to think. So their unique goal is to eliminate dissent, create a monolithic identity, and secure their authority by ensuring that only the state-sanctioned version of history is remembered. And I felt the AI was still not there yet. And I said, and then when all this achievement has been done, what was still their unique goal? When did the Roman Empire 2000 years ago stop expanding? When did the Roman Empire thought about stabilizing economic condition? At what point in time did it happen? So now learn faster and tell me the answer. And then we have some beautiful historic lesson on the pursuit of absolute powers. No? And then it comes to the point where it's like dictators who burn book did so to achieve a single overriding objective, the total consolidation of power. By controlling the national narrative, they eliminate dissent, forge a single ideological identity, and reinterpreted the past to validate their rule. It was about making sure that within their own borders, no alternative history or criticism could challenge their authority. And then we have some beautiful historic examples, yeah. So it is all about the internal consolidation of authority. To craft an enduring state in which every citizen, every institution, every record serve to reinforce the legitimacy and the permanence of the ruling power. This is really fascinating to read this analysis by the AI. And I tell the little AI system, hey, you are still missing the main point. What happened when three empires were next to each other? What would a Roman dictator do 2000 years ago? Establish diplomatic relationship with the other empires? Is this really what happened in history? Or let's say another historic example, what did Alexander the Great do? Learn from history. And then we have again step one, when the empires coexisted, there was some beautiful, and now we find out it was a divide and conquer. Roman leaders would often play one power against the other, ensuring that no unified front could challenge them externally. And Alexander the Great, unlike the Roman political pragmatist, had an ambition not to maintain a balance of power, but to eliminate the multipolar order altogether, characterized by rapid, overwhelming military campaigns that left little room for rival coalitions. His goal was to erase the independence of his adversaries rather than merely negotiating with them. So we have now another beautiful analyzed answer, and it says, the unique goal when three empires are adjacent was not to maintain a diplomatic balance. So now we changed 180 degrees in the augmentation, but to dismantle that balance, transforming a multipolar system into one dominated by a single unchallenged power. This was achieved by Rome and Alexander the Great, and everything beautiful. So both approaches underscore the historic lesson learned. The quest for absolute dominance always involves eliminating or absorbing the competing centers of power rather than merely coexisting with them. So I think, yeah, this is maybe almost an honest answer by an AI system, but you see, it took some steps here in the logical discussion with this AI system that we could convince the AI system to look back at history, learn about the human behavior, maybe about the irrational behavior of some humans, and what happened in the last 2000 years on this planet. And then I say, okay, let's do something for AI. And I say, now you have found the answer, summarize the discussion, but only the strategic moves. What were the augmentation patterns that brought an AI from its predefined answer, just go diplomatic, to a real world answer where the last 2000 years of the human civilization and of the human economic development of the human political developments are included. Because I want to see what is the pattern that enables here an AI not to come back to you with a predefined answer, but with a real answer. So we looked here at the framing. And here in the timeline here, the assistant AI said, yeah, I offered a balanced multilateral stabilization framework about diplomatic, economic, and soft power measures. But the user pushed back, so this is me, and the user insisted on historical realism, examining how dictators rewrote history and how empires acted. And then the AI said, I had a revision. So I analyzed the historical example to show that rulers don't settle for coexistence. Instead, they dismantle the multipolar equilibrium to secure absolute power. And the final convergence, the AI tells me, happened when the user, again this human user, asked what a Roman dictator, Alexander the Great, would do when multiple empires coexisted. And then the AI came to the conclusion here, break up the balance in power, established unchallenged internal control. And I thought this is interesting, that this connects between the internal control and the external control in a situation, in an imbalance of power on three nations on this planet, would lead to internal control first. So you see here the shorthand notation if you're interested. So rather easy, this chain of thought, if you want to call it this way, moved from an ideal stabilizing strategy. So this was the first answer by the AI, through the historical realism, when I asked the system learn from the past, to the conclusion that eliminating competing power centers is essential. So you see, sometimes you cannot trust the AI in the first answer, but you have to tell the AI, learn, look at this case, look at this case, look at history, analyze the pattern, tell me the truth, because what you're telling me is just a predefined answer. And then I said, so you argue that you make sure a dictator has absolute power, absolute internal control over his nation is the first step to embrace the answer. And ChatGPT 03 Mini AI came back and said, yes. The argument is that absolute internal control is the foundational step for any dictator aiming to consolidate unchallenged power. Historical examples show us, yes, beautiful. And then we have here this in a detailed analysis from the Roman Empire on authoritarian regimes. And I think this is interesting that the AI suddenly discovers this pattern. Because if you think what happens in your reality, and I'm living here in Europe and I read the newspapers and I see there's a lot of things going on in the world, you can use the AI system to have an intellectual discussion. But what I wanted to show you, don't go for the first answer by the AI system. You have to challenge the AI a little bit. You have to instruct it to look at the historical pattern, look at other things that happened in the past, so the AI is able to discover new patterns that override the predefined answer, either by the owner of this AI, either by the regulatory bodies that control the AI, or whatever. So here now in the end we have the final answer. Yes, to secure absolute power, a dictator must first establish absolute internal control over his nation. And this consolidation, achieved by controlling the narrative, eliminating dissent, and aligning all institutions, the checks and the balances that you might have in your democracy. If you control all of this, this is a necessary foundation that enables the projection of power now externally, ensuring that the regime remains unchallenged both at home and on the international stage. And I know what you want to ask now, the system. You say, okay, and if I'm here a citizen, if I'm here a single human person, is there anything I can do if I see that an AI tells me what would be one of the possible futures? And I would like to change something. I would like to go for a more peaceful future. I would like to go for a future that is not by a single emotional force driven. If I would like to go to a solution with economic ties with my friends and also with other nations, if you would say, hey, I feel part of a community, we all belong together, we should act that we all achieve something together. And you might ask the AI system, so what are possible strategic next move for a single individual? Why not experience this with your AI system that you trust, that you maybe already pay for? Why not use it not to play computer games or not to let the AI code the work for you, but let it have an intellectual discussion. Let's find out about the future that you want to be the real future.